Hello everyone, thank you for having me. I'm Harini balamurugan going to present you about Linux. First of all, I would like to give you an overview of Linux. Next, I will focus on their distribution, architecture, also highlighting them. Now, let's go into the topic. Linux. What is Linux? Linux is a family of open source, Unix-like operating system based on the Linux kernel. Now, we will see what are the Linux administration. Introduction to Linux operating system, Linux distribution, architecture of Linux, advantages of Linux and disadvantages of Linux. Now we will see introduction of Linux operating system. Linux is a community of open source which is Unix-like operating systems that are based on the Linux kernel. It was initially released by Linus Torvalds on September 17, 1991. It is free and open source operating system and the source code can be modified and distributed to anyone, commercially or non-commercially. Initially, Linux was created for personal computers and gradually it was used in other machines like servers, mainframe computers, supercomputers, and etc. Nowadays, Linux is also used in embedded systems like routers, automation controls, televisions, digital video, recorders, video game consoles, and smartwatches, etc. The biggest success of Linux is Android operating system. It is based on the Linux kernel that is running on our smartphones and tablets. Due to Android, Linux has the largest installed base of all general purpose operating systems. Linux is generally packaged in a Linux distribution. Now we will see Linux distribution. Linux distribution is an operating system that is made up of collection of software based on Linux kernel, or you can say distribution contains the Linux kernel and supporting libraries and software. I have mentioned the top 10 Linux distributors below. And you can get Linux based operating system by downloading one of the Linux distributions, and these distributions are available for different types of devices like embedded devices, personal computers. Around 600 plus Linux distributions are available and some of the popular Linux distributions are MX Linux, Manjaro, Linux Mint, Elementary, Ubuntu, Debian, Sols, Fedora, OpenSUSE, Deepin. Now we will see architecture of Linux. Linux architecture have the following components. Now let me see what is kernel. Kernel is the core of the Linux-based operating system. It virtualizes the common hardware resources of the computer to provide each process with its virtual resources. This makes the process seem as if it is the sole process running on the machine. The kernel is also responsible for preventing and mitigating conflicts between different processes. Different types of the kernel are monolithic kernel, hybrid kernels, exokernels, microkernels. Now we will see the other components of Linux architecture. System library. It is the special types of functions that are used to implement the functionality of operating system. Then shell. It is an interface to the kernel which hides the complexity of kernel's functions from the users. It takes commands from the user and executes the kernel's function. Then the hardware layer. The layer consists of peripheral devices like RAM, HDD, CPU, etc. And the final one is system utility. It provides the functionalities of operating system to the users. Moving on to the advantages of Linux, the main advantage of Linux is it is an open source operating system. This means the source code is easily available for everyone and you are allowed to contribute, modify and distribute the code to anyone without any permissions. In terms of security, Linux is more secure than any other operating system. It does not mean the Linux is 100% secure. It has some malware for it, but is less vulnerable than any other operating system. So it does not require any antivirus software. The software updates in Linux are easily and frequent. Various Linux distributors are available so that you can use them according to your requirements or according to your taste. Linux is freely available to use on internet. It has large community support. It provides high stability. It rarely slows down or freezes and there is no need to reboot it after a short time. It maintains the privacy of the user, it is network friendly, the performance of the Linux system is much higher than other operating systems. Linux is compatible with a large number of file formats. Now we will see what are the disadvantages of Linux. It is not very user friendly, so it may be confusing for beginners. It has small peripheral hardware drivers as compared to Windows. Frequent update and sometimes complicated. Now, I would like to thank Dr. MGR Educational and Research University and Dr. Sonia Priyadashni ma'am for this wonderful opportunity. Thank you.